Reddit, how have you made a rude person's day worse? Excuse the change in voice, I am currently getting over COVID. Today on the train, I sat next to a woman who was angry that I sat next to her because she wanted the 2 seats to herself. As I sat there, she kept mouthing under her breath how she just wanted to sit there alone, blah blah blah. Despite the fact I wanted to tell her that it was public transportation and she needed to get over it, I kept my mouth shut. A few minutes later, a large woman with a large purse comes and stands in the same car I was in. I get her attention and tell her that she could have my seat. She huffs and puffs her way to me, and I help her sit down while grinning at the angry woman who was upset I'd sat beside her. I enjoyed watching her head almost explode from anger as the other large woman's rolls and purse pressed against her for the rest of the ride. Anyone else have any of those subtle revenge stories? Edit, this lady is a regular and is a known seat hog. I've seen her get into arguments before with people because she wants 2 seats to herself. Everyone pays to ride the train, so if there's a seat open, then it's up for grabs. I was working as a manager in a big nightclub about a year ago. I don't wear a uniform, but have a radio and run the security team. The venue has a great smoking section that looks out onto the street. One night, the venue was packed, so I did my usual roam making sure that there were no problems. However, it was too packed to walk through the smoking section, so I walked down the street instead, but could still very easily see into the smoking section. One guy stares me down, then calls me over and starts swearing at me for no reason, and telling me that, quote, pieces of crap like you can never even get into a venue like this. He obviously had no idea I was the manager. However, I didn't want to have security get into a fight inside with him. The guy kept telling me he would punch me out and stuff, and was clearly trying to look macho to impress someone. So I agreed and told him to come and meet me outside, and he could even have a free swing. He puts his drink down, takes off his jacket, and storms outside. Once he walked outside, I walked back inside and told security not to let him back in. The look on his face when he realized I ran the place was priceless, and then the realization that he couldn't get back into the club was amazing. It was the easiest and most fun removal I have ever done. I'm a manager at a grocery store, so I get awesomely rude customers on a daily. Every Wednesday is senior discount day. You have to be 55 to 60 to qualify for the discount. Needless to say, Wednesdays are tense. Lots of seniors and lots of other people who don't want to deal with the seniors. I don't generally mind the old folks. Most of them are pretty cool and have some interesting stories and cute jokes. This Wednesday, there was one particular customer who was being a huge pain in the butt from the moment she walked in. She was tall, blonde, high heels, very made up, and dressed to the nines. She was probably late 30s to early 40s. She came storming up to customer service. There are no parking spots. This is ridiculous. I'm going to request to corporate that you expand your parking lot since you don't seem to have the initiative to request that yourself. Off to a great start, lady. She comes storming back up about 45 minutes later. I am in a huge hurry, and every line has someone in it. I need to check out here. We had 3 lines open, and each one had one single customer. One. I say, no problem, but I'll get you at a checkout. You have too many items to get here. She has a huge hissy fit. I don't have time for this. Let's go. As I'm checking her out, it is constant whining. You only have one brand of makeup? That is ridiculous. I only wear MAC, but I was going to settle for Revlon, but you don't even have that. Now I have to make a whole separate trip. Please don't put my bread on top of my eggs. The eggs could roll over and crush the bread. Please bag my avocados separately. I need to use those for a face mask tonight. They need to be perfect. I have a photo session for work tomorrow. I'm in a magazine. She was unbelievable. Finally, at the end, I had enough. As she's about to pay, I say, don't forget today is senior discount day. You get 5% off. She just stared at me. What? I smiled broadly. Every Wednesday, senior citizens get 5% off their bill. I'll go ahead and take it off. You are 55 to 60, right? She is staring at me, debit card in hand, cheeks getting red. I lose my smile slowly and say, oh, you don't qualify? Sorry about that. Maybe next year. Thanks for your honesty. I haven't seen her in the store since. I used to work for the DMV, and the one I worked at had pretty limited parking. Surprise! I had left for lunch, came back, and was having a hard time finding a place to park. I finally found a spot, so I drove up to it and put my signal on showing that I was waiting for it. People, in my experience, usually respect this and continue on. Not this time. Just as the car was backing out, after I had waited a few minutes, a car came from the opposite side of the lot, made eye contact with me, and then shot right into the parking space. I was so mad because now I would be late after looking for a new spot. As I drove past the woman that had taken the spot, I just shook my head and she responded by shrugging her shoulders, smiling, mouthing the words, "Oh well," to me, and then ran her finger from her eye down her cheek as if to mock me crying about it. I continued into work, got in trouble for being late, but had actually forgotten about the incident until whose number gets called to my station but Miss Spot Stealer herself. The look on her face was priceless. Keep in mind that I'm not your average DMV worker. I understand that stuff happens and waive penalties all the time and treat my customers with respect because I believe that what goes around comes around, and I know how crappy it is to wait at the DMV all day. I'm usually so nice about getting penalties taken off people's accounts that I get in trouble for it at times. So, I greet Spot Stealer as nice as I would anyone else. In fact, it may have been nicer than it normally would be. She may have thought I didn't recognize her. Her registration is far past due, with hundreds due in penalties. I let her tell me her whole sob story and then finally tell her that she owes in full because she was aware of her due date. She argues it a little until, out of sight from my manager, I mouth the words, "Oh well," and drag my finger from my eye to my cheek, mocking her tears. At point, she puts her head down and proceeds to take out her card and pay the full amount. Because yes, we do take debit cards. What goes around, comes around. When I was working a crappy job in my younger days, a customer was upset that he had to wait in line like everyone else before being able to make his purchase. He actually said, "Do you know who I am? I own hotels." To which I replied, "Well, sir, I'm sorry, but this isn't Monopoly. This is Krispy Kreme." He was not pleased. Not even COVID can keep me from telling you to subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, and I promise I'll sound a lot better next time. I was sitting in my car taking some photos with my new smartphone while using different settings. Then there was this woman who had just stopped at a one-way street with only one lane. So she stands there for like 10 seconds doing nothing, and I thought this is very unusual. So I started to make a video. Another driver comes and honks. She then starts to reverse and hit the car of the other guy with their big BMW. 4 guys jumped out of the BMW and start yelling at the guy. You have to know in Germany, always the one who hits another car from behind will be blamed if he can't prove that it wasn't his fault. So we have a classic case of insurance fraud. The poor guy at the back was really worried because he knew he couldn't prove it. I just sit there in my car and waited for the police. Then I go outside and the police started to get the stories. Of course, there was 4 against 1. I just stood there and listened to the woman complaining about who this idiot hits her from behind and her brand new car is now damaged. After the police took the statement from both sides and even take my statement, they said there was no chance that 2 versus 4 could prove that he didn't do it. 2 of the guys at the BMW said they didn't know the girl and were pedestrians who saw it. That would increase the credibility. So they made all false statements to the police, and exactly that's the thing I wanted to happen. I then told the police, "Oh wait, there's just one thing," like Columbo style, and said that I have a video of what happened. I showed them to the police, and the women and the drivers just stand there with mouth open. You could not only see how she hits his car, but also that the quote, pedestrians were with the women in the car. The guy then hugs me, and we became good friends. Turns out he lives near me, and we spend the evening drinking and gaming. I'm in a massive line at a store. I'm next in line, but the person in front of me has a crap load of stuff. A helpful clerk sees the mess and opens another aisle saying, "I can help the next customer." Well, that's me. However, the checkout counter has 2 sides, a right and a left. It is set up for people to come to the right side, but the left can be used as well. As I am stepping over to her counter, this jerkwad from the very end of my line is sprinting to her counter, pushing people with his partner in tow. He arrives right before me. They have a mountain of items in their cart, which he starts throwing on the checkout counter. I am standing there on the other side with my one item burning with rage. Checkout girl waits until he stacks all of his crap on the counter, looks at me, looks at him, and says to him, "I'm sorry, sir. You're on the wrong side. You'll have to go to the end of the line," which is now massive. I put on my biggest grin, made eye contact with him as long as possible, and loudly told the clerk how awesome she was. Just the other day, I was at a Chinese buffet, and the 3 people in the booth next to me were questioning the waitress. She appeared to be Asian Hispanic, about voting for the president and who she planned to vote for. She had trouble understanding them and communicating that she could not vote. They immediately began taunting her that she shouldn't be here if she couldn't vote, that she didn't even know who the president of the United States is, and then took a picture and said they would post it on Facebook. I later found out the waitress was on a school visa and couldn't vote, but was unable to convey that to them. After the waitress walked off, one of the girls at the table, the one who took the pic, looked up and asked me where I worked because I looked familiar. When I replied, the local university in the social work department, she commented that she had recently been in my office to apply to our program, to which I replied, "Yes, I remember you, and I'm also on the admissions committee," followed with a wink. The color drained from her face, and she knew she was screwed. Karma's a jerk. TLDR, I provided unsolicited marriage counseling services to a jerkwad. I worked at a hotel several years ago and had to deal with insufferable pricks about a dozen times a day. Hotel stories about Billy Mays watching granny adult films, a person that threw hot coffee in my face, a person that spit on me, and a crazy lady that slapped me are in my common history. The best/most evil revenge I ever got was on a guy that stayed with us 4 days a week for the entire 5 years I worked at the hotel. The big utility company in our area was having financial issues, and he was the leader of the auditing team that was sent in to straighten it out. Anyway, I would interact with the guy at least a few times every day I worked, and he was always very rude and condescending. As an example, one of his coworkers would ask me for a local restaurant recommendation, and he would chime in with, "Yeah," because minimum wage workers are known for their taste in fine dining. If someone asked me for something personal, he would say something like, ask him what life choices he made to be here plunging toilets and writing down my preferred wake-up call time. Maybe he can share his wisdom so we all avoid his fate. Stuff like that. He was just a jerk to everyone on the hotel staff and was always very demanding. Since I saw him every day, I noticed that he had developed a relationship with one of the younger women on his auditing team. I saw the romance blossom from flirting to full-on groping and grinding in the hotel lobby. One day, he had just finished delivering one of his delightfully crappy bon mots to me, and I was fuming. Then he screamed at one of my coworkers because she had a Filipino accent, and he said he only wanted his room cleaned by, quote, white Americans. I vowed revenge. His wife called in to speak to him later that night, like she usually did, and I said, "Oh, I think he's sleeping in Mrs. Blank's room tonight. One moment, please." And then I connected his wife to her room. His wife must not have told him what I had said, because he didn't try to get me fired. They got a divorce. They didn't have kids, but according to another guy on the auditing team, his wife got the house and custody of their dog. He stopped staying with us shortly after the phone call. I was riding my bike to work one day, and when crossing a street, in the legal zone with the walk sign, a woman ran me over. She drove through the crosswalk looking to turn right and ran right into me. She stopped after I got bumped hard enough by her fender to take a spill and have some bruising all down my side. She gave me an exasperated, "my bad" wave and continued to talk on her cell phone, ignoring me as I picked myself and my bike up. I walked right up to her open window, grabbed her cell phone from her ear, and chucked it into a nearby parking lot as hard as I could. I swear that was the farthest I have thrown anything in my life. She gaped at me in shock as I struggled back onto my bike and slowly rode off, fuming yet victorious. Then a half-mile farther on my trek, I got attacked by a goose. Not my best day. TLDR, woman hit me with her car, got revenge, got attacked by goose. Edit, those who have pointed out that riding a bike in a crosswalk is not legal are correct. In this particular instance, it was not a sidewalk but a designated bike path. They had a normal walk signal at an intersection, but I believe it was still acceptable to ride across as it was a bike-specific path. I could be wrong though. I work in local theater, and we have a lot of rude, awful women who are part of local ballet schools come through our venue who are the mothers of the dancers. Once, this woman rang up wanting seats to an almost sold-out ballet performance that had been on sale for 4 months the day before the show and did nothing but abuse me for 5 minutes because she left buying them too late, whined about how she shouldn't have to pay for her kids, whined that we should get a bigger venue, it seats just under 500, then put me on hold while she rang 3 of her relatives to see if they wanted seats too. She was positively awful. The seats I was about to sell her were the only ones in the theater left, and there were good seats. While I'm on hold, a grandma of one of the ballerinas comes to the desk and asks if we have any seats left, as she'd been in hospital and couldn't buy them earlier, but said she'd understand if we were booked out. I put the phone with the on-hold music down and sold this old lady the last seats for the show and gave her an invite to our next year's dance season for her granddaughter and herself, so she'd know exactly when all the important dates were coming. She thanked me over and over, and she's now one of our regulars and brings her grandkids to our shows. 2 minutes after the old lady leaves, the jerk on the other end finally takes me off hold and says she wants the remaining seats that we have left. I tell her, "Sorry, we've just sold out while you had me on hold, I'm afraid. Better luck next year. Anything else I can help you with?" She was choking with rage on the other end of the phone. It was fantastic. I watched a lazy shopper park their grocery cart right behind another person's car instead of putting it in the cart return. I got out of my car, ran up and moved the cart, and put it behind her car. I then ran off and watched her have to get back out of her car since she couldn't back out, and then finally proceed to put up her cart the right way. I felt like a champion of the people. Saw a woman with her husband toss a squash into a cooler that they apparently didn't want anymore. As they walked away, I picked up the squash and followed them. They left their cart for a moment, so I put the squash into their cart and walked away. She had a dumbfounded look on her face when she noticed it back in her cart. I put it in a very noticeable place and proceeded to put it on a nearby shelf, and they walked away. I, of course, took it off the shelf and followed them again, doing a drive-by drop-off of the squash. At this moment, my girlfriend got fed up with my antics and made me stop. I would have done it until they gave up and bought the squash, or I was caught. I'm very easily amused. Heard this from a DJ in my hometown. He's pushing his cart of groceries out of the store and over to his car when a woman pulls into the handicap spot in front of the store. No placard, no handicap plates. Jumps out of the car without so much as a limp and heads into the store. He gives her the stink eye about taking up a handicap spot, and she snarls, "Deal with it," and sashays into the store. This guy is mad. He sees a couple cops who were leaning against their cars talking. They hadn't seen it, so he goes over and tells them the story. They smile and say they'll handle it. He puts his groceries in his car, and as he's pushing his car back to the store to put it in the rack, good guy DJ, he says the cops had blocked the lady's car with theirs and were leaning against their car waiting for her. As he's putting his cart in the rack, the lady comes out of the store with her purchase, sees the cops, and almost craps herself. The fine in California is $250 to $500 for a first offense. Priceless. He walks over to her and says, "I dealt with it." Female Redditor. I was out at the local watering hole having a few beers with a group of friends. The group became larger and larger with time. After a while, I got semi-separated from my fiancé. I was introduced to a guy. We'll call him Bob. The introduction went like this. "Bob, this is psychocentric. Psychocentric, Bob." To which he says, "Every psychocentric I've ever met is a slut and unfaithful." Now, I don't get bent out of shape without good reason, so I just brush it off as drunk banter, or maybe a recent breakup with a psychocentric and say, "Well, I neither, but nice to meet you anyway, Bob," and shook his hand. The rest of the night, he would go to the bar, walk back, and give me the stink eye. For whatever reason, he didn't like me. The feeling was becoming mutual. I decided ignoring him would probably be best. He was certainly not in his right mindset, right? A few hours passed, and I was sitting by his female friend, having fun talking and giggling. He puts his elbows on the table in between us, staring at me like I had done him wrong somehow. I just kept on with our conversation and ignored him. He then puts his nasty face right next to mine and says, "So, are you a slut?" My temper and alcohol got the best of me, and I yelled, "No, and what is your problem exactly? I've been doing my best to ignore you. Get a clue." He then chest bumped me and said, "Do you want to go?" I'm all for equal rights, but this was the first time an able-bodied adult male has asked me, a girl, if I wanted to throw down. I walk over a few steps to my fiancé, who was talking to a bouncer friend of ours, and said, "This guy says he wants to kick my butt," while the douche just keeps advancing. The bouncer looks at him, gives a hand signal, and soon 5 red shirts, bouncer uniforms, surround him. He was, quote, escorted out of the bar and went to his minivan, drunk. I called work. I work for the sheriff's department. They got a good tip on a sure thing DUI. I might not have thrown down, but I think I won that round.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.